Hello everyone and welcome to my new video of code stacks. So in this video we'll be seeing how we can use PostgreSQL in Discord bot. But yeah, I got one suggestion from one of my Discord friend to make a video on so that's why I'm making one. So let's get into it. So first of all, obviously you need to install PostgreSQL. The link is in description. It's an open source software so you can easily find it. Plus, while the installation of setup, make sure that you remember the password which you have filled because that password will be used everywhere. Now, once you have installed it, just type in your search bar pgadmin. So when you open it for the first time, it may take around like 30 seconds. It sometimes may take up to 1 minute just in case your system is a bit slower, but it should not take more than 2 minutes. As you can see, it's opening. Now the password which you have filled while installing the setup is to be filled here. So once you have just filled it, press OK. And when you hit the server, it will open your databases. So in the start, you will have only one database, which is this Postgres. These are just my two additional databases. What you can do is you can just create one database and name it anything. So what you can fill in here is the name of your database. So let's say I'm making an economy system. So I'm going to say economy. And I'm going to save it. So our economy database is created. So we'll be storing the data in tables. So you just have to head over the schemas, then over to tables. And as you can see, there is no table. So we need to create one table. And I'm going to name my table as economy. So I'm naming all the variables as lowercase so that you can differentiate between the system functions and the variables, because the system functions are always in the uppercase. Now it is economy. I'm going to name the columns. So let's create one column and let's name our first column as user ID, and it will be a big int. So there are many data types and it should not be null. Null is just none type object in Python. Let's name the other column as money and let's make it big int as well. So it can be null. So that's why we are not going to set it to not null. And let's hit save for now. Now, as you can see, when you open this column, so you have user ID and money. So I guess the work for pgadmin is done. Now you just need to close it. Now head over to your directory where your bot is located. So guys, for now, I'm going to pretend that you already know how to make a Discord bot in Python. And if you don't use cogs, then you should be using, because it will make your code more cleaner. And if just in case your code is working slow, then cogs might help it. So I highly recommend every one of you to use cogs. So once you have done this, now let's go to our main.py file, and I'm going to say from my async pg dot pool import for me create pool. Yeah. Now you need to create one async function. You can just see as it is written here, async def create db pool client.pgcon. So this client is my bot variable. As you can see, it's commands.bot. Many people name it bot, so you have to just write bot instead of client. And client.pgcon is equal to async pg.create pool, which I just imported. And database is the name of my database, and our name of the database was economy, as you can see. So I'm going to say economy, and the user was Postgres, and the password, you have to fill the master password which you have set it while setting up the PostgreSQL. So I'm just going to fill the password. It's better practice to use environment variables, so I'm going to use them. You should be doing the same. Now once you have done that, just come down below and just you have to say your bot object, which is client in my case, dot loop dot run until complete create db pool, which is the async function we created, and this parentheses. Obviously it's a function. So once you make sure of all these stuff, then you can just close your main file and head over to your cogs. So this is my economy cog which I just now created. So let's create some functions. So the first thing we need to do is create a on event function. So I'm going to say commands dot cog dot listener. So this is just an on event function, and I'm going to say async def on ready, and I'll just have to pass the self. So firstly it's gonna print, and after this what are we gonna do is we are gonna say await self dot client dot pgcon. Now as you can see in our main.py file it was client.pgcon, so we have to say self dot client dot pgcon, and firstly we're going to execute. So what I'm going to do is, let's say you're using some hoster or something for your Discord bot, then you might need to create one table. If it's not exist, maybe that particular hoster has its own database. That's why you need to just make it for the backup so that the code doesn't crashes. It still works, just the data is lost. So you just need to do this. You just have to say self.client.pgcon.execute, and you'll have to say create table if not exist. As you can see, I have used uppercase in all of them. So basically you'll have, it's like the syntax of Postgres that you have to use uppercase, create table if not exist, and I will just have to specify the table, which was, we made the economy table. So I'm going to say economy, and I'm gonna enter my user ID, which is my variable name, and the variable type, which was big int. Second was money, and it was also big int. You can keep the variables uppercase as well, but I just want you all to recognize the difference. Now there might be one more problem, like let's say that the table exists but one of the column does not exist. So for that we can say self.client.pgcon.execute, and I'm gonna say alter my table economy, and I'm gonna say add column if not exist, and I'm gonna just specify my user ID, which was a big int. Now there was one more thing, the big int should not be null, so I'm gonna say not null, as you remember, and make sure to write not null in uppercase. Make sure to add not null here as well, because we don't want the user ID to be null. Null is just none type object. So I'm going to say alter table economy, add column if not exist, user ID, which is a variable, big int, which is the data type, not null, which is another attribute of that variable. So I'm going to copy this, and this time I'm going to just change it to my money. So money is also one big int, so it's just a backup plan that if the variables does not exist, then it will just do the stuff. Now what are we gonna do is, like whenever we need to add something in the database or subtract or get the data, then we need to lines like this. So instead of writing the same line again and again, what we can do is we can create functions for that. So let's create some async function. So I'm going to say my async def, and let's create an add function. So I'm going to say my first parameter will be myself, second will be ID of the user, and my third will be amount. So in order to add, firstly we need to get the how much balance does the user have at the present moment. So I'm going to say my balance is equal to my await self dot client dot pgcon dot fetch row. So firstly I was executing, now I'm just fetching the data, and I'm gonna say select, I'm gonna say money, which is my variable name, select money from my economy is my table name, where my user ID is my variable name, is equal to my $1. So this might sound a little bit uncanny, but you'll get used to it and you'll know what the exact use of this was. So I'm just selecting money from economy where my user ID is equal to $1. So whatever I'll just put as the second parameter will be set it equal to my user ID. So I'm just gonna pass my ID. So now it is like user ID is equal to my ID. So it's just gonna get the money of the user. So now we have the balance. Now what are we gonna do is basically balance. It's gonna return us something like this: money is equal to, like, let's say 2000. So it's gonna return us this. So in order to get the money, we have to just say balance 0 like this. So basically I've tested this out, that's why I'm saying. So yeah, so what are we gonna say is we're gonna say await self dot client dot pgcon dot. This time we are going to execute because now we have to add. So I'm going to say update economy, which is my table name, and set my money equal to $1, where my user ID is equal to my $2. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to say updating economy, which is my table name, and I'm setting my money to some value where my user ID is equal to some value. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to pass the first parameter, which is the money, which is the amount in our case. So I'm going to set a default amount. Like, I need not to specify amount all the time. You can even set it to 0. It's totally your choice. And the second will be my ID, the user ID, obviously. So our balance is just what we have got from this fetching. So I'm gonna just pass 0 so that it just get me the integer. So I'm gonna add the previous balance with the amount we have at the moment. Now guys, there is one more problem. The problem is that what if the money is a non-type object, which means that there is no entry of the user. So for such cases, we need to create one check function. So I'm going to say async def check. So we just need to pass self and ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my user is equal to await self dot client dot pgcon dot fetch row, and I'm going to pass select asterisk. So what I'm doing asterisk is just to import everything. Like I'm gonna say, like I can say from main import asterisk, which means import everything from a main file. So just like that, I'm saying select asterisk from my economy where my user ID is equal to my $1, which is my ID. So I'm just getting everything from economy where my user ID is equal to ID provided, and if that ID does not exist in the table, then this user will be a non-type object. So what I'm gonna say, if not user, which means that the user is non-type object, means the user does not exist, then this will return us an empty array. So I'm gonna say await self dot client dot pg con dot execute. This time we are adding something, so I'm gonna say insert into economy, and I'm gonna pass user ID, money, and I'm gonna set the values as $1 and $2. Let's make sure to close the parentheses. Now for the values of $1 and $2, so I want the user ID to be ID and the money to be 2000. You can even set it to 0. So this is what the default money of the person should be. So you may want the person to start from 0 or something like that. I just want that users through my bot should be starting with 2000. So it just depends upon you. So that is all for the check command. So you just need to call this command at the start of every function and make sure that every user has been once through this check command. So I'll be demonstrating that in a moment. Now let's create one function to get the balance of the user. So now you must be pretty much acquainted with how to get the balance. So we just need to get the self and the ID, and I'm gonna say my balance is equal to this exact same thing. Await self the client.pg counter fetch row, select money from economy where user ID is equal to ID and ID is the ID which we passed. And we are just simply gonna return us bal 0. So this is just gonna return us the balance. So balance command is done. Now let's say you want to create something like a leaderboard. Then we have certain functions for that, like async def top. So I'm going to just pass the self. We need not to have anything else. I'm going to say tops is equal to my await cell.client.pgcon.fetch row, and I'm going to say select asterisk from economy, and I'm going to say order by money and desk nulls last. So what I'm just saying is select asterisk means select everything from my economy table, and I'm just ordering them according to their money, and I'm saying that all the values which are null should be at last. So this is just going to return us a list of all the users with their user IDs and their money. So I'm not creating any wallet and bank system because obviously I'm just demonstrating how to use PostgreSQL. I'm not making an economy system right now. So yeah, so I'm just gonna return my tops. Yeah, so that is all for the functions. Now let's use them in some commands. So I'm gonna say @commands dot command. I'm gonna say async def, and let's say trial. I'm just naming my function as trial, and I'm just saying ctx. Now I'm just demonstrating how you can use all of these functions. Like let's say first and the foremost thing you need to do is check. So I'm going to say self.check, and check is this function right here. So I'm just going to pass in my, firstly I need to get the ID. So I'm going to say ID is equal to ctx.author.id. So I have the ID and I can check the ID. So if the user does not have an account, then it is just like an open account function in an economy system, if I should say. So yeah, so I'm just checking the ID, then I'm gonna say await self dot add. So let's say I want to add something in the user, so I'm just passing the ID and after the amount. So even if I don't pass anything, then 2000 will be added to the user's account because the default value is 2000. So I can just pass anything like 1000 or maybe 10,000 or maybe 100,000, just anything. And you can even pass -1 to subtract anything. Like let's say you want to subtract anything from the user's account, then you can just pass -1 into your amount, which is anything. Like I can say loss. If some variable's value is lost, then you can do something like that. So for now I'm just adding 1,000 maybe, you know. And if you want to create a leaderboard, then you can just get the data by tops is equal to await self dot top. Yeah, so it is just going to return the top people. And let's say if you want to check if my 2000 is more than await self dot balance, and I'm just going to pass the ID. So if you want to do something like that, if the user ID is less than 2000, then you want to do something else, you want to do something. So that's how you can use economy system with Postgres. So it was pretty straightforward. Basically Postgres is heavenly detailed stuff, so basically I cannot explain all of it in just one video. So I just gave a glimpse to all of you guys how you can use Postgres. So rest of it depends on you. I've given the documentation link of Postgres in the description. You can have a look. There are tons of other functions and many other data types which you can use and make your work easier. That is pretty much for this video. So I'm just hoping that like goal of this video is 15 likes maybe. So yeah, that's all for this video guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like the video if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, subscribe and share for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.